Everyone knows that Luffy is the good guy in One Piece, and whenever he has the chance to help someone, he's always there. But throughout the story, he's done some things that are, at the very least, questionable. And those are exactly what we're going to look at in this video. The 7 worst things Luffy has done in One Piece. So stick around, because this video ranks them from the least bad to the absolute worst thing he's done. We're going to look at the most questionable things Luffy has done in One Piece. He might be the protagonist, but he's done a lot of messed up stuff along the way. But honestly, the worst thing you could do right now is not like this video. Come on, that's the real worst thing. So hit that like button, and let's get into the video. Starting off in 7th place, we've got that time Luffy decided to steal gold from hillbillies. After the battle against Enel and his priests, both the Skypieans and Shandians make peace and throw a huge party to celebrate. The party lasted several days, and one night while everyone was still asleep, Luffy woke up his crew and said they should steal the city's treasure and escape the next morning. And that's exactly what he did. Luffy took part of the crew into the belly of the giant snake, who was still asleep, where they grabbed all the treasure the snake had swallowed from the ruins. Meanwhile, Nami already knew they were doing something wrong, so she and the crew waited anxiously for her to return so they could leave without being caught. When Robin showed up with several Skypieans behind her, the crew panicked and fled as fast as they could with their stolen treasure. The worst part? The Skypieans were actually planning to give them a much larger amount of gold as a thank you gift. But because they were afraid of being caught stealing, Luffy fled in a hurry and ended up losing a giant gold pillar. Sure, the Skypieans probably wouldn't have been upset at Luffy for taking some gold. After all, it's a city made of gold. But that doesn't change the fact that this was one of the worst things he's done in the story. And this is still mild compared to the next ones on this list. The next moment, ranked 6th in this video, takes place back in Orangetown. After Buggy starts taking over the city by shooting and destroying everything with his buggy balls, the town's mayor sees no other choice but to personally challenge the pirates. So of course he gets himself ready and goes. But as soon as he gets there, he's caught by Buggy within seconds and ends up in serious trouble. That's when Luffy arrives to save him, and with backup now there to help, the logical thing for the mayor to do would be to step back and let someone stronger handle it. After all, he saw he couldn't do anything. But no. The mayor still insists on continuing, saying that he was going to save the village and fight alone without anyone's help. The mayor refused to back down. At that moment, seeing that the mayor wouldn't stop and wanting to keep him from getting hurt, Luffy pushed him hard into a wall, which ironically ended up injuring him and leaving him unconscious on the ground. And well, Luffy could have just tied up the mayor or convinced him not to enter the battle, but instead he chose the easier route and knocked him out with a big hit. The worst part is that most of Luffy's bad actions come back to him as karma, and this one was no exception. After the townspeople showed up to help defeat Buggy, they saw the mayor lying unconscious on the ground and all ran to capture Luffy, forcing him to flee in a hurry and abandon the treasure they had stolen from Buggy. Now in 5th place, we have something that Luffy did which could have completely changed the entire story of One Piece. On Long Ring Longland, he encounters the Foxy Pirates, a crew that recruits members through the Davy Back fight, which is basically a competition between pirate crews where the winner gets to take a crew member from the loser's crew. Of course, Foxy challenges Luffy to this duel. Even though his own crew warned him not to accept the game, Luffy still agreed to the competition, risking his crewmates over a silly game. This was by far one of the worst decisions Luffy has ever made, and perfectly shows how he needs to understand what's at stake before agreeing to things. He could have easily lost every one of his friends, and it would have been entirely his fault. During the match, he even ends up losing Chopper, who was luckily won back later. And the worst part? In the end, Luffy didn't even want any members from the rival crew. If he didn't want anyone from their crew, then why the hell did he accept the competition and risk all of his friends? Exactly. There's no good answer, and that's why this was one of the worst things Luffy has ever done. Luckily, it all ended well. Of course, everyone knows that Luffy would basically trade his crewmates for a piece of meat, and that's pretty much what happened in our 4th place entry. When they arrived at Whiskey Peak, Luffy and his crew were caught off guard, because even though they were pirates, which usually isn't very welcomed around the world, they were graciously received by the inhabitants of Whiskey Peak. Luffy and his crew were treated like gods and welcomed with a huge party full of food. After all the fun, they eventually fell asleep, but the people who welcomed them didn't do it out of kindness. In reality, They were members of Baroque Works, a criminal organization that was planning to take them down. Zoro realized that they were criminals and began to fight them. It's at that exact moment that Luffy wakes up and sees Zoro attacking the people who had just given them food. Thinking Zoro was being ungrateful, Luffy becomes furious and confronts him in a battle. Now, no one's ever accused Luffy of being a genius, but he should never have questioned the loyalty of one of his crewmates the way he did with Zoro. He trusted strangers. He met that same day more than his very first companion, and even went as far as to attack him. Luckily, in the end, Luffy learned the truth, and we never see him make that mistake again in the story. Now, moving on to the third worst thing, Luffy has done something you might not have even noticed, but it's actually way more serious than it seems. When Luffy found out that his brother Ace was imprisoned at Impel Down, he didn't hesitate for a second and broke into the Marine's most secure prison, where the world's most dangerous criminals are held. And here's where you start to see the problem. After entering the prison, Luffy and the allies he met inside began freeing prisoners from the upper-level cells. He even released Crocodile, someone he personally knew had tried to overthrow an entire kingdom and destroy everyone in it before being captured. In other words, he unleashed hundreds of dangerous criminals back into the world people who were locked up for a reason. We all know that the Marines aren't always just, but not all pirates are good like Luffy either. In fact, most of them are evil and only sail to plunder. So Luffy freeing all of them was one of the worst actions he could have taken. On top of that, it was also due to Luffy's infiltration that Blackbeard was able to break into the prison and recruit some of the most horrifying criminals in history. Because of Luffy's actions, he ended up triggering one of the most catastrophic events in pirate history. Now, in second place, we have the scene where Luffy argues with Vivi in the middle of the Alabasta Desert. Basically, Vivi's plan was to reach the rebel army led by Koza, her childhood friend, and convince them to stop before they clashed with the royal guards. Crocodile had manipulated both sides into fighting, and she hoped to prevent a war, but along the way, Luffy gives up on that plan. When his friends asked him why, Luffy finally revealed his reasoning. He explained that even if they managed to stop the rebels, it wouldn't stop Crocodile. To truly end the conflict, Crocodile himself had to be defeated. Then, he called Vivi's wish to save everyone naive, saying that in any real battle, people are going to die. Hearing that, Vivi becomes enraged and punches Luffy, and immediately, Luffy punches her back hard. So hard, in fact, that even his crewmates yell at him, saying he's gone way too far. Honestly, when I first saw that scene, I thought it wasn't even Luffy. I thought it was Mr. 2 in disguise, because that felt so out of character. It was just so strange, and far from something Luffy would normally do. And even though, in the end, Luffy was right and they eventually made peace, that punch he gave to Vivi was completely unnecessary. And finally, in first place, we have the worst thing Luffy has ever done. As soon as they arrived at Eni's lobby, they took their ship, the Going Merry, which they were still using at the time, to the shipwrights to have it inspected and repaired. But they received the worst possible news. The Going Merry couldn't be fixed. After thinking about it for a long time, Luffy came to the conclusion that they needed to get a new ship and let the Merry rest. Luffy then shared his decision with the rest of the crew. But Usopp didn't take the news well at all, because of his deep bond with the ship. He had received it from Kaya, and he was always the one who fixed it when needed. Usopp refused to believe what the shipwrights had said. Still, Luffy stood firm in his decision. The argument between them escalated more and more, until at one point Luffy snapped, yelling at Usopp that if he didn't agree with the decision, he should just leave, clearly kicking him out of the crew. Sanji, seeing that Luffy had gone too far, kicked him and yelled that he was talking nonsense, but it was already too late. Usopp decided to leave the crew and even challenged Luffy to a duel for the Merry, making things even worse. Now, Luffy had to fight one of his best friends, and in the end, what was left was Luffy in a miserable state. Well folks, those were the worst things Luffy has ever done in the story. Many of them happened either because of his lack of intelligence or because he acted on impulse, but that doesn't mean they weren't bad decisions. And of course, feel free to disagree and comment on other moments where Luffy did something questionable. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did and want more content like this, make sure to leave a like so I know what kind of videos you like most. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Thanks so much for watching all the way through, and I'll see you next time.